Mr. Williams, thank you very much for taking time for this interview. I will go straight to the questions. And these days we have NASA is preparing to send its first crewed mission to the moon in 55 years, marking the beginning of a new phase in space exploration. Also, we increasingly hear about the new space race. In your view, is this primarily a competition between nations or still a space for international cooperation?
Well, the U.S. obviously is a leader in lots of things and is currently a leader in space exploration, but even as important or more important is a partnership that is being developed in the Artemis program. Modeled largely in what I was able to experience in the International Space Station, which was a very successful partnership. And partnership has geopolitical significance beyond the space exploration itself. So yes, it's very important.
We also see major changes in the space industry in recent years, especially with the rise of private companies. How has the role of the United States in space evolved over the past decade, and how companies like SpaceX influenced this shift?
Well, it's been the policy of the U.S. government for many years, I would say more than 20 years, to seed commercialization of space. And a historic parallel, of course, would be the early days of aviation. And we know, of course, what resulted in that with the widespread commercialization of aviation that we take for granted nowadays. I would say space flight has a different potential in terms of a business model, but still it's been the policy to try to seed commercialization. And that resulted in examples like SpaceX. In some ways, it's just, it's no different than previous space programs, other than it's a different way to procure the ability to go to space. Instead of procuring a spacecraft, we've procured in SpaceX, for example, a service to deliver crews to the space station and return them to Earth.
The Artemis program is seen as a cornerstone of current U.S. Space policy. Is it mainly a scientific mission or a strategic step toward deeper space exploration, such as missions to Mars?
Well, Artemis 2 is a test flight, so it's a development flight, not to do a lot of science, but to prove out the technology necessary to get to the moon eventually. And the current policy is to try to put a crew on the surface of the moon within the next couple of years or so. And that is to build the beginnings of a sustained presence on the moon, to do the research and technology development that the moon offers in terms of potential. If you look back in history, the Apollo program was largely driven by geopolitics and the space race with the Soviet Union, and the political will to execute that program was based on that. Less so on the exploration of the moon, more so on the geopolitics of beating the Soviet Union at getting to the moon. And that's evidenced by once it was accomplished with Apollo 11, it occurred, of course, with 5 more landings on the moon through Apollo 17, but then the program was canceled largely because that geopolitical objective was met.
How realistic is the idea of a permanent lunar base, and what role will international partners play in this effort?
Well, I think it's a very realistic, and that's the goal, of course, in the Artemis program, is to gain a long-term presence on the moon, to be able to do more devoted research and technology development. And it's in the context of an international partnership, which is very important. So we've got international partners as well as commercial partners, each developing components of that program to include habitation elements on the surface of the moon. So that'll be important to exploit the research to be done on the moon. It'll also be important just to develop the operation and the ability to do so, which if we ever do get to Mars, That'll be a significant step in developing the capability to do even that.
We should recognize that space today is no longer just about the science, but also about the global influence. And tell me, why is it important for the United States to maintain this leadership in space, and can space exploration be considered a tool of soft power?
I think certainly you could argue that space exploration can be considered a tool of soft power, of leadership, of engagement in an international stage. You mentioned the word competition. If most people would say that if competition exists today, it would be with largely China. Now, Russia has chosen not to participate with us in the Artemis program, but we're still partnering with them in the International Space Station program, so it's less of a competition there, perhaps more so with China. And of course, like lots of examples historically and currently, there's a whole lot that goes into that equation of the geopolitical circumstances than spaceflight itself. There's other diplomatic and economic pressures and elements of competition, if you will, that enter that stage.
And also, I have a few rapid-fire questions for you. When will humans live on the moon permanently?
Permanently, I don't see them living permanently. I see short stays on a semi-permanent basis within, I would say within 8 or 10 years.
Is space more about science or politics?
You'll never be able to separate the two. There will always be scientific objectives, but it'll also be enabled by the political will to do so. And there's, of course, lots of factors that go into the political will.
What does humanity not understand about space?
Space exploration is just one chapter of the history of human exploration, and all of human history is the history of exploration and discovery. So it's in that broader category.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this
interview,
Mr.
Thank
Lună.
you.